All right, great. Well, welcome everyone to this eBird tutorial, an introduction to eBird, if you will. I'm Connie Manis. I do serve as the Executive Director of the Kent Land Trust. And if I can advance my slides, just a little bit about the Kent Land Trust. So the Kent Land Trust is a nonprofit land conservation organization. We were formed in 1989 by Kent residents who were concerned about loss of land to development. We have conserved a little over 3,000 acres in the town of Kent. That's a mixture of land that we own and land on which we have conservation easements that are privately owned. We maintain 10 trails in nature preserves. Those are East Kent Hamlet Nature Preserve, the Audrey and Robert Tobin Preserve, Iron Mountain Preserve, Skiff Mountain South Preserve, Bull Mountain Preserve, Curry Preserve, the Kent Mountain Preserve, which links to the Cobble Vista Trail System, the West Aspetuck Scenic Wetlands, the Avian Preserve, and the KLT Farm, which hosts the Claire Murphy Trail, and we'll talk much more about that this evening. Our service within the Kent community includes the KLT Farm, a picture of which you see here, which is leased to Megan Haney, who operates Marble Valley Farm, the Kent Farmers Market with the Chamber of Commerce on the Southern Gateway Field. That happens on Fridays beginning at the end of May. We sponsor concerts with the town of Kent, their Park and Rec department. We host a townwide Memorial Day picnic each year, looking forward to that, and host frequent educational and recreational programs like the one that you're attending today. Often in partnership with our local Boy Scouts, the Kent Lions, the Conservation Commission, the Garden Club, the library, and other land trusts. So one of the ways that we became involved with eBird has to do with our ongoing restoration at the KLT Farm, which is, again, the Marble Valley Farm on Route 7. And it's Claire Murphy Trail. So the Claire Murphy Trail goes out past a freshwater lagoon to the Housatonic River. It's a really terrific place for wildlife viewing, including viewing waterfowl and migratory songbirds. So in 2022, last year, KLT received a grant from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology to conduct habitat restoration around the freshwater lagoon and on the trail. And part of that grant included an educational component to engage our community in establishing before and after data to help us evaluate the impact of that restoration and help direct future management efforts. So this program is supported by that grant, and we thank the Cornell Lab. So I'll let you in on a secret. I often use a little tool to help me plan what to say. FDR is like a communications mnemonic for what you hope that the people receiving your message will feel, do, and remember. So tonight I'm just going to be blunt and tell you overtly that I'm hoping that you will, as a result of tonight's program, feel excited about new aspects of appreciating birds, do engage with eBird and in learning about and taking care of the world around you, and remember that we all have a part to play in this. So what is eBird? Raise your hand if you've had some experience with eBird. Okay, so some that have dabbled just a little bit. Since its start in 2002, eBird has grown to become the world's largest biodiversity-related community science project, and it's available in every country in more than 40 languages. eBirders around the world contribute more than 100 million bird sightings each year, and that's growing. It's a collaborative enterprise with hundreds of partner organizations, thousands of regional experts, and hundreds and thousands of users. eBird is managed by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and it began with a simple idea that every bird watcher has unique knowledge and experience. So eBird crowdsources this information, this knowledge of any everyday birder to power new data-driven approaches to science, conservation, and education. And at the same time, they share their data for free and provide tools to everyday birders that make birding more rewarding and fun. So tonight we're going to see just how fun this can be. So who uses eBird? Birders from the community, mostly like you and me, but also educators, and students really appreciate the real world application of the eBird tool. There's a separate guide for K to 12 students, K through 12 students, and it's called eBird Essentials for Educators. So just to let you know about that, that is available for any of you who might be working with teachers or with schools. Scientists and researchers also use eBird. eBird connects birdwatcher sightings to a global research community, and eBird data has been published in more than 200 peer-reviewed publications. Conservationists are also using eBird data to inform law and policy decisions. And so you can see where I put the cover of the State of North America's birds. Connecticut, I'm sure, in their State of the Birds report every year uses eBird data. There's also a picture on the left-hand side of how data from migratory birds and where those migratory birds were going helped to inform and drive conservation efforts down in the Maya forest, which is in Mexico, Belize, and Guatemala. And more conservationists, local conservationists, use eBird data for monitoring and conservation planning, including on-the-ground actions like land protection and habitat restoration and management, much like what we're doing at the KLT Farm Claire Murphy Riverwalk. So how can you use eBird? The first thing that you'll need to do is create your free account. And this happens just the same way that you'd create any other account. We do it a million times every day now. And you can see the screenshot at the bottom in the middle, basically with fields that we're all pretty used to at this point. This account works across Cornell Lab projects that you might already use, including Merlin, Bird ID, Bird Academy, Project Feeder Watch, and the Great Backyard Bird Count. So if you've created an account to participate in any of these things, then you'll use that same sign-in. Originally, eBird was done on a desktop or a laptop. And fortunately for us, it's now also available as a mobile app, which makes it much easier to do field collection. But the desktop version is still really useful. It has some great features, so it's worth exploring. The free eBird Essentials course, which I have depicted here on the right-hand side, is a terrific way to learn more. You can see that there's a great deal of content, 5 lessons, 14 topics. They say the completion time is 3 hours. I can tell you it did not take me quite that long, but I learned an awful lot. So if this program tonight leaves you hungry for more, dip into the eBird Essentials videos, and you can go at your own pace. So set up your account on the desktop, but then download the mobile app to go out in the field. And here's kind of what it looks like on the screen. You can get that from the App Store, the Apple App Store, or Google Play, depending if you have an Android or an iPhone. And then before you start, you will be prompted to download a bird pack that is based on your location. So this kind of preloads a list of birds that you're likely to see in the place that you're going to be birding. And you can download other bird packs if you go someplace exotic like Costa Rica or something like that. You can get bird packs that are specific to that area. So just something to know about and check back into. So now again, before you'd start with your eBird, there's a second app that you're going to want to download, and that is Merlin. Now, has anyone here ever used Merlin? It's really, really fun. Merlin can help you identify birds that you're hearing or seeing while you're engaging in birding. So it's much quicker than like trying to go back home and surf the internet and listen to calls and get information from all over the place. It's all included in Merlin, and it has images and sounds for over 7,500 species of birds around the world. So, very convenient way that packages all of that information. So what does it do? It uses real-time sightings from eBird to quickly narrow down your options to species that you are most likely to find at the place that you're birding. And apparently it is more than 90% accurate, which is really pretty amazing, I think. So I have a reminder here, though, with that asterisk, just to mention that Merlin's a great start for bird identification, but it's always a good idea to consult multiple sources, especially when you're making an ID for a species that eBird would consider to be rare. And so the best way to do that would be to use a field guide. Cornell Lab has a good field guide. You might also know about the Peterson's guide to birds, but having a field guide along with you is always a good idea. And when you make an ID, both from Merlin or from a field guide, you need to pay attention to details that are going to help you feel more confident in your identification, like the expected range of the bird that you think it might be, the seasonality that you're in, the behavior of the bird and its habitat. A little bit more of that as we get into this. Okay, so there's a few ways to use Merlin, and Bird ID is the first. It comes up on the top when you open the app, and Bird ID uses 5 questions to help you identify a bird if you didn't know what it was, right? So it asks the questions: where did you see the bird? When did you see it? What size was the bird? And I couldn't put all of the screens on the slide, but I gave you an example on the right-hand side. You can see here how it'll prompt you to answer, how big was this bird? Was it tiny? Was it crow-sized? Was it in between a crow and a goose? And that's what that third question looks like. So you go through this series of questions. After size, what color or colors was the bird? And then the last question is what was it doing? So that would be something like, is it on the ground? Is it on a wire or a fence? Was it at a bird feeder? All of these things, these 5 questions and your answers apparently give Merlin enough information to be 90% correct in showing you what your bird might be. And at the end, it spits out an answer and it prompts you to say, that is my bird, or this is my bird. And that allows you to confirm that, yes, that is the bird that I was seeing. Really fun. If you don't use the bird ID, or in addition to the bird ID, you can also use the photo ID or the sound ID applications. And this is one of those things where, for the sound ID, you turn on a recording and you hold your phone up and your phone listens to the bird that you're hearing. It uses sound wave patterns to match them with the sound wave patterns of recorded bird calls. That audio is very sensitive, so it can really distinguish between a lot of different kinds of birds. However, it's not always accurate. So it would be really good, for example, at identifying a mourning dove that has a very, very specific call, but with other birds where the patterns are close, or where there might be birds that are mimics that mimic the sounds of other birds, it's not quite as good at distinguishing between those. So you want to verify your sound ID, especially if you think you've heard something rare, by listening to some audio resource. And BirdNet is yet another application, again, hosted by Cornell Lab, that can be really helpful in checking out whether or not your audio recording is the bird that you think it is, that Merlin thinks it is. And then photo ID, similar to the sound ID, is one of those applications where you take a picture of your bird, submit it to Merlin, and Merlin tells you what it might be. You need to have a clear shot of the bird. I personally find it a little difficult because I'm often seeing the bird in great distance. And so I take the shot, and once I try to magnify it to get it into the window for Merlin, it gets a little blurry. So still fun, very easy to try. I will tell you, I have the most fun with the sound ID because I just love watching it light up as the symphony of birds around me make their various calls. really, really cool. So we'll get back to eBird now. And when you go out, what are you actually going to do? And so for somebody who hasn't tried this before, you probably are wondering, like, what do I actually do with this application? So what you're going to do is log a checklist of the birds that you see while you're out using the eBird app. And that checklist records where and when you went birding, the range within which you were birding, so the kind of the distance, like I walked a path of a mile or something like that, and what you saw or heard during your time birding. So we'll start with the when component of that. Because the date comes up automatically, as you can see on the right, when you open up the checklist, you have the date, so that's the when. That part's easy. You don't have to worry about that too much. It also records the duration of your birding session. So again, you know, that part of the when is pretty much automatic. Note, however, that if you took a break, if you had to pause, or if for some reason you were going back into the application, recording a checklist after the fact, you can manually override this to change it and make it accurate. When you submit the checklist at the end, you will be given the option to indicate whether you were birding across a distance, traveling, walking along a road or a trail, for example, or you were stationary. So just know that as you close your checklist, there's a place for you to indicate that, to change the default if you have it on traveling, you know, and to make sure that it's accurate that you were either sitting in eBirding or you were walking along a pathway. Notice here on the image that you can toggle record track to have eBird keep a GPS record of where you are. So it's another part of the where. Once you press the button that you see here that says start checklist, you will see that you're able to enter information about the bird species, each bird species that you observe, whether by sight, ear, or both. There are a few panel views that you could use. One of the easiest is the quick entry, which we will look at the next slide. So this is what quick entry looks like. It uses a search bar at the top of the eBird mobile view to let you type something like 5 goose, and that pulls up all of the birds that have goose in their name and then adds 5 to the tally of whichever species you tap on. So you can also maybe type 5 Canada for Canadian goose, or even 5 go, and the prompt is going to end up coming up to make it easy for you to just tap and add that to your list. So you can see now, when we talk about what it is that eBird wants you to do, that you're logging a list of the species that you observed and the number of them that you observed. Now, I used to think, I was led to believe actually, that if I didn't actually see the bird but only heard it, I should mark an X rather than use a numeral for the number observed. However, what I've learned from taking the eBird Essentials course is that that's not what Cornell Lab wants us to do. They want information about the number observed, because if that number is 1, that's a lot different from 20 or even 5 in terms of their data. It's far better to have an estimate than an X, which could really mean 1 or like a million. So they do want you to try and make an estimate of the number of birds that you're seeing or hearing of each species. On the other hand, a count of 1 in eBird always means 1 and exactly 1. So don't use a 1 to indicate an X that a bird is present. If it's 1, it's 1. If it's 2 or 3 and you don't know which one, an estimate is fine if you're not certain of the exact number. Lastly, sometimes you see a lot of birds, like a flock of geese or maybe a whole bunch of chimney swifts all at the same time. And in this case, you can add information on how you identified the birds and how you arrived at the count. So maybe you add information in the details, like I counted by tens and then extrapolated to the whole area, or I counted them individually as they flew overhead. Good for now? Dana, go ahead.
So I'm trying this on my phone and I have this checklist in progress going, but when I tried putting 2 mallard in, it doesn't show me what it shows on your screen. I don't get anything on my screen. It adds it. Well, I don't know. I can't see what birds I've seen. I have no way to view that
Oh,
I can
well, I'm going
find.
to tell you, that's kind of the next thing, actually. So
Okay.
there's also, this is really helpful when you're out there in the field and you want to remember what you already added to the list. So there's a way to do a checked view. So look down on the bottom of your screen and see if there's the symbol of a check, like a check mark. And when you put on the checked view, that brings up the list that you've already logged. So
it's not doing anything. Let me try adding something again, see if it done.
I use the check view all the time because I often forget. I can't see it.
It's a little check though.
Yeah.
It's not doing anything. The other
I often
one,
forget. But you know what, Dana, I will work with you on Saturday.
yeah, I don't
to
want to close
look
things
at
down.
how this looks on your phone. But I'll be out birding and I'll forget that I already logged, say, a cardinal. I mean, something really common, and I'll just be like, oh, did I already put that down? So this is a really good way to keep your list kind of right up in front of you as you're walking along. And here's a fun fact. Apparently, the more you eBird, the more you find. So researchers from Cornell Lab looked at what they call species accumulation rates to compare how many species eBirders found over time based on the number of checklists that they had entered. And what they found is that the more that you eBird, the more quickly you find birds on your checklists. Or maybe you're just better at it. But they say somebody in the Eastern United States might encounter an average of like 11 species in 1 hour in their first checklist, but somebody who's submitted 10 checklists is likely to find like 13 species. So the more you do this, the better you're going to get at spotting, what the birds are and being able to enter them into your checklist. So now you have another reason to go birding more often. Sometimes we make an observation and we see an orange symbol like this one next to the species osprey. And this indicates that that bird is rarely seen at your location or would be unlikely to be there at the time that you're making your checklist. When you observe a rare or unusual bird, you must provide additional detail to establish the credibility of your sighting. And you'll see when you click into that observation that there is a place to add details, which you might do by trying to describe the bird, where it was, what it was doing, and other specifics that might lend credibility to the observation. But no matter what, if you report a rare or unusual sighting, an eBird reviewer will see the observation and review the specifics of it. And they may reach out to you to try and corroborate your sighting to make sure that the data is good. The reviewers are expert birders, and they're a really terrific resource for us. And the reviewer for our region is Gregory Hanasek, who has reached out to me on several occasions when I was really excited to have seen a rare, unusual bird. Adding a photo or a sound recording is one of the best ways to document rare or unusual sightings. So even an image or recording from your cell phone can really help to document what you saw. You have to add media through your computer. So there's not a way at the moment to just simply upload when you're doing this on your cell phone, upload the audio that you took or the photo that you just took, but they're working on that. And I think they will have it fixed soon. Of course, you should only add media that matches up with the specific individual bird that you're seeing on your checklist. So it's against the rules to go home and take a stock photo of the bird and upload that. Even if it looks exactly like what you saw, you're supposed to add the details from what you actually observed in real time firsthand. Note that you don't have to limit photos and audio to rare or unusual birds. You might just enjoy capturing this media. and want to share it with other bird enthusiasts. So every photo and sound that you add to your list is automatically archived in the Macaulay Library, which is the world's premier scientific archive of natural history, audio, videos, and photos. And you can add a rating to your media to indicate how clear the bird is in the image or the audio recording, kind of steering people who are using this information to the best images and recordings. Okay, so, again, just a little bit more on rare and unusual birds or high counts of birds. This is a picture of Lori Doss and KLT's summer interns from last year after they documented a Virginia rail for the first time. I just have to let somebody in, I'm sorry. Some of the most rewarding birding experiences can be sighting an unusual bird or witnessing, an awe-inspiring number of a particular species. But since this doesn't happen every day, eBird really wants to make sure that your sighting is correct and correctly documented, so they know that they can rely on that data. So don't be disappointed when reviewers deny your observation because there isn't enough substantiation to be able to rely on this. And this has happened to me several times, and it is a little bit disappointing, but don't be disappointed. It doesn't mean that you didn't see it or hear it, but just that the eBird reviewers really want this community science tool to yield accurate, reliable information. So when an eBird entry is flagged, one of two things occurred. Either you had, great luck and you actually saw a rare and unusual bird, or you made a mistake and they just want to verify that. So they might reach out to you to ask you. Here's an example of how Lori Doss, using the Marvelwood Schools account, made a checklist when she heard a brown thrasher. So what she did, she indicates that this is an incidental observation here. It was not made when she was out birding. She added details explaining that first she heard the bird and she thought it was a brown thrasher. So she used Merlin to record it and it identified a brown thrasher. So she went outside and she looked around until she found the bird singing on top of a spruce tree. And then she took a photo of that and uploaded it. So here is a checklist file that's got photos, has got her audio recording, and has her detailed notes that help the reviewer to confirm that she actually saw what she said she was seeing. All right, this is just another slide borrowed from Lori to show you how the interns took photos in order to document their observations, and they uploaded them all to eBird. All right, getting to a place where we're going to have questions, so just bear with me for a couple more slides. Back to the checklist, you've logged these species that you've observed. So the next piece of information is where you were. And if you allow the eBird app to access your location, so if you turn on GPS, it will automatically pull up the coordinates and the places nearby where people have birded before. In some places, there will be pre-existing eBird hotspots to choose from, places where people have really indicated that this is a birding destination, or this is a place where we want more data. And if your birding fits with a hotspot, please use it. And at other times, you might be birding away from hotspots, in which case you'll create your own kind of personal location. You can give these personal locations a name if you wish that's meaningful to you, especially if it's a spot that you'll bird regularly, like your backyard at home. Always make sure to choose a location that accurately represents where you went birding. So that's hard to go wrong when it comes up with the coordinates and gives you the menu of the hotspots, but just be aware so that you're not somehow, moving the map and indicating that you're on another continent when you observe the birds in your checklist. When reporting distance values, which is another question, you should always report the unique distance that you traveled. So again, if you were walking along a mile-long road, you would report that as a mile. But if you did an out and back, what eBird would have you do is still only report the mile rather than 2 miles, because what they really want to know is what is the range? What is the total area of the range where you were eBirding? So just remember that if you turn your GPS tracker on and it tracks that you walked 2 miles because you did an out and back, that you're going to manually shorten that so that you've only got a mile of distance in there. And please don't eBird and drive. In general, what Cornell Lab would have you do is use checklists for shorter distances and duration, as opposed to going on a 15-mile hike, because that really doesn't help them know where the birds are, in the different habitats that you might cross while you're walking that extreme distance. All right, when you're done with your birding session, for every eBird checklist, you'll answer the simple question, are you reporting all the species that you've observed? And while this is simple, the answer is really important. When you answer yes, it doesn't mean that you've detected every bird that was present at the place that you were birding. And that's pretty much impossible, right? All it means is that you are reporting all species that you were able to identify by sight and sound to the best of your ability. What the question is really asking is, are you reporting everything that you identified, or just reporting like a highlight reel of some birds that you like and intentionally omitting common species like house sparrows or rock pigeons, or birds that you love a little less than others like cowbirds, which are nest parasites. As long as you're not intentionally leaving anything off the checklist, even if it's common, even if it's unexciting, then you can answer yes, that you're you're submitting a complete checklist. When you include all the species and mark yes, your checklist becomes much more powerful, because by including every bird that you detected, researchers can use your sightings to verify what birds are present at the time and place that you went birding, and which birds are not present at the time and place that you went birding. And John Johnson and I had a conversation the other day about what to do if you went out birding and saw nothing. And I think that answers our question, John, because the Cornell Lab is just as interested in what you didn't see at a particular time and place and duration, etc., than as they are in what you did see. So I don't know what you would report if you saw nothing at all, but if you went out and listened for half an hour and only saw one bird, that would be really meaningful to them. Once submitted, the reviewers check over your submissions to identify questions and improve the data. And again, if you're fortunate enough to find an unusual bird, a local reviewer will reach out to learn more about the story behind your sighting. All right. One more slide, at least on this part. So some special concerns. So what if you didn't want a checklist to show publicly? You can hide a checklist permanently or temporarily, and you might want to do that permanently if, say, there's a potentially sensitive species observed, which is at risk of human exploitation, something really rare that people will come and ruin the habitat, or maybe even take the bird. You might temporarily hide a checklist if it's a species that will move on with time. So maybe a migrant that happens to be particularly rare, but is not going to stay in the area. And at some point, it will be okay to remove the hiding from the checklist, because if you didn't hide it at the time you submitted, people would flock to that space. And if you remove it and somebody sees it and it's 2 months later, they know the bird's already gone. You might also hide checklists on private property, and private locations can also be labeled restricted access so that people know that permission is needed to visit the site. eBird does have a sensitive species policy that helps to protect birds whose populations would be impacted if people started showing up to see them in great numbers. So specific locations for those species are not visible on eBird maps, whether or not you hide the species. They're going to hide that for you. If you don't wish your name to appear on public eBird output, you can set your name to appear as an anonymous birder by adjusting the settings in your account. And what if you wanted to report birds from your house without telling people where you live, but you didn't want to hide the data? You can also rename your location so your address isn't visible, or you could move the location a little bit, like maybe move it, from right in front of your house to, an intersection so that people know basically where the bird is, but don't need to know that that's where you live. Obviously, just count once per bird, not if you see it again in a few minutes. And also, eBird is intended for observations of wild, living birds. So please do not report dead birds or captive birds like birds in a zoo or pheasants on a farm that are being raised domestically. Sharing checklists. When you're out with other birders, your group should only report one checklist. And so there is a function called eBird checklist sharing, and you can send that to your group leader so that all of your observations go into the same checklist instead of creating a situation where 5 people saw the same bird and it ends up getting counted as 5 birds. And then finally, and this was so helpful to me when I found this out recently, what should you do if you're not sure about your identification? Sometimes you just have to let go and not count a bird if you're not certain, but also eBird lets you report what they call SPAs and slashes, and a SPA is that SP period. So if you know the species of a bird, you can report it as, you can name it and report it as SP, saying, I'm not completely positive what kind of sparrow this is, for example, but I know it was in the family, and still make a account that way. You can also use the slash. Let's say you saw a hawk, you feel pretty confident that it was a hawk, but you're not sure if it was a red-tailed hawk or a Cooper's hawk. You could write red-tail / Cooper's hawk, and that way still end up submitting a complete checklist, even though you weren't completely sure on that identification. All right, I think now it's been long enough with me talking to ask you if you have any questions. And I can come off share for the moment, just so we see your faces. Is everyone just noodling around with their phones right now? Because that's what I did when I got trained.
How do you identify a hotspot?
That's a really good question. And I think I have a slide that helps us show it. And hotspots are the next thing that I was going to talk about. So John, that's a really good question. And you are anticipating what it is I want to tell you too, which I like. All right. Anyone with questions before we go on? I'm going to share up the screen again and we'll get to those hotspots. All right, so first of all, how many hotspots does the Kent Land Trust have? That's the most important question, right? We have 7, and they are at our publicly accessible preserves, usually preserves with trails. They include the Claire Murphy Trail that we've been talking about tonight, the Tobin Preserve, the East Kent Hamlet Nature Preserve, Iron Mountain Preserve, which happens to be across the road from where I live, so I eBird there frequently, the Avian Preserve, the West Aspetuck Scenic Wetlands, and Skiff Mountain South Preserve. So if you're on a Kent Land Trust trail, there's a good chance that there is a hotspot there. But you can find hotspots using a, let me see actually, if I'm not sure which slide has this on it. I would skip ahead. Slide 31. I'm going to come back to all of these. But Oops, I skipped too much ahead, sorry. Okay, oh, okay. When you log in, John, to eBird, you will have a home screen that has this kind of an image here that says explore regions and hotspots. And you can use this search bar for explore regions to drill down to locations that are near where you're going to go birding. So you could say Northwest Connecticut, you could say Kent, whatever it is. You could also click this this menu option here, explore hotspots, and what it'll do is come up with a map that has all of the hotspots, and as you zoom in, you can find more easily the ones that are near you. And a hotspot ends up looking like the map looks like it has pinpoints in it. And the hotspots have one color, they happen to be red, and the other locations, personal locations, are usually indicated in blue. But as you hover over, it will show you that that is a hotspot and what the name of that hotspot is. David, go ahead, but come off mute. You're on mute. David, we can't hear you.
So how is a hotspot determined? Is it by the number of birds sighted there by other people, sort of like a traffic camera on a traffic report? Or is it environmental issues or?
People set them up. So for the Kent Land Trust, we set them up specifically because we wanted to gather data on the birds that are using our preserves. I'm not sure if, expert birders would do it at a location that's really well known for certain birds or bird diversity, but they need to be created, and not everyday birders don't create them. Organizations would usually create them.
Okay.
And you don't want, you wouldn't want a place that had two conflicting hotspots. Like, you only would want one hotspot in a place. So I guess if there was a place that you thought should be a hotspot, there would probably be somebody that you could talk to at Cornell Lab to ask them if that was appropriate.
Connie, I believe anyone can create a hotspot, can't they? It depends what you choose, which kind of marker you're setting on the map.
I need to check on that, John. And I know that when we did it for the Kent Land Trust preserves, that Lori Doss was, pretty clear that we wanted to be intentional in what we were indicating as a hotspot, and that that we didn't want to end up with a lot of random hotspots all over the place that would confuse people, or where you'd end up having one person posting to this hotspot and a second person posting to a hotspot that is essentially the same place. So
right, you wouldn't want to muddy the map a lot.
Exactly.
And I don't think I have ever set one up. So maybe if you choose that marker, you need to defend it somehow. I'm not sure.
I'm not certain either. Dana, go ahead.
So how do you use the hotspot? Like, I have a hotspot a mile away from my home. How would I use that? Just to see what species are found there?
You would first of all use that to choose as your location when you did a checklist. So if you went there and went birding there, you would definitely use the hotspot as your location. But if you wanted to find out what birds might be at that hotspot, at a given time, you could explore hotspots, and that would give you an idea of what other people have seen there at different times when they uploaded checklists. And that can be really cool and really robust. And I think I have slides that might show that a little bit. So I'm going to backtrack. See where
can I jump in with a question?
Yeah.
Wendy here. What particularly is a hotspot? Is it a piece of technology, or is it just
It's a location.
It's a location. There's no electronics there that's boosting the signal or anything. Okay.
No, it's your electronics that are there gathering the data when you're logging the checklist.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so here is an example of what you can do with eBird hotspots. So this is a screen that's showing some information that was gathered at the hotspot of the Claire Murphy River Walk. And you can see that here there were 69 species observed, that there have been, over all time since the hotspot was created, and that 17 complete checklists were completed at the Claire Murphy River Walk. You can also see that the people creating these checklists also uploaded some photos of the birds that they saw. And you can see that there have been some recent visits. And actually, this is an old slide. So when I say recent, at the time this slide was made, which was obviously last year. But, again, these hotspots are places where they've really been highlighted as places where people go birding, or where people are hoping that data will be collected. So let's go on and see another example. So here, a different screen. So this is all, done by exploring around on your desktop, a hotspot. Shows recent visits to the Claire Murphy hotspot. And I just drew this one down as I was preparing for this presentation. So you can click on any of those dates where you see that it's blue, the 3rd of April at 9:05, to see the entire checklist and see the 14 species, for example, that were collected that day. You can see that KLT staff, like myself and Gwen Suford, have a bit of an advantage because we're there at the office most often. But you can also see on the right-hand side that we're less fastidious, really, than the Marvelwood students about uploading our media. So this is an area for improvement for us. I was chagrined to see that we didn't have any pictures put up. So you can see really how eBird kind of inspires some healthy competition within the birding community. You can see how I'm listed second in terms of the top eBirders. So maybe if I go eBirding before work, another 5 to 10 times, I can move up to number 1 on that list on the right-hand side. And here's just another way to access information about a hotspot. This is several screenshots just because there was so much photography uploaded to the Claire Murphy Riverwalk hotspot. So you can page through all of the different uploaded photos and audio recordings that are on file for a hotspot. So for people interested in kind of previewing what they're likely to see when they go visit a hotspot, this can be really helpful and interesting. About those people who are looking to visit, you can also use a hotspot to kind of make a form or like a blank checklist in hard copy for visitors to help them prepare and keep a lookout during a birding session at the hotspot. So an example of that is this 3-page checklist of species that are commonly seen at the Skiff Mountain South Preserve hotspot. So these can be printed out and used as a reference during the session. They're also really good for education and for contests because they're kind of like doing a treasure hunt or a scavenger hunt. All right, and one more view. This is just one more way of looking at the data that is collected across site visits to a hotspot at different times of the year. So you can see that the greatest diversity of birds at the Claire Murphy Riverwalk is occurring during the spring migration months of May and June. And so that gets me really hyped to go out and see what I can collect during those months. It's good now, but it's going to be even better in just a couple of weeks. All right, so one more subject to really cover, and that is my eBird. So similar to the way that you can use eBird to access compiled data for hotspot areas, my eBird is specific to your account and compiles all of the information that you have submitted. So here you can see that this birder in the example on the slide has observed 449 total species worldwide, which is a lot. Birders call this their life list. And just like people generally have like bucket list items, very active birders might have certain species that they very much want to add to their life lists. The manage my categories, which are, it's really hard to do this without like actually being in the application, but you will see when you open up my eBird, they have a drop-down menu with these manage my categories, and they'll be on the right-hand side of your eBird homepage. They give you lots of options for displaying and browsing what you've stored and contributed to eBird. So manage my checklists, for example, allows you to view and edit all of your eBird submissions. You can add photos or sounds to corroborate your sightings, as we talked about earlier. And you can also share your checklist with your birding friends. Manage my locations is kind of the catalog of every location where you've ever been eBirding. Then other manage my options include ways to share checklists or importing data from spreadsheets. Some birders have data on the birds that they saw before eBird was created, and there is a way to upload what you've seen in the past. So also through my eBird, you can personalize your profile, you can add a picture to it, you can sort your checklist by region, you can find out the first time that you saw a certain bird. It's all really robust. It's very easy to go down a rabbit hole if you're sitting around in the nighttime after having a really successful day birding. So here, just for example, here's a profile of a former Marvelwood student, and his checklists are here in the United States and also in his home country of India. And from his profile, you can see that you could get in touch with him. You could also follow his photography through a link that he's posted to his website, or you could look at the 62 species that he's uploaded photos of in eBird itself. And you could check out his checklists if you were interested in what he saw. Maybe one of the checklists is a place that you would be going to, and you can see if you could beat out, what he was able to see at a similar time of year. So we looked at this slide already, but just to emphasize that there's a ton that you can do with eBird. And so you can really go as deep as you'd like to go. There's a way to log trip reports, which is almost like a text journal. You can follow different birders that that you enjoy, that you think take good pictures or see neat things. You can explore regions, you can look at trends and data, you can look at the science, you can look at the modeling that the Cornell Lab is doing with the data. You can also sign up to get alerts when rare birds are reported nearby, or where birds that you need for your life list are around. So, and they will send you like up to the minute, like somebody just reported this. And I imagine that there are people who think it's worth it to drop everything and to try and get to a location so that they can see the bird too. Just finally, before we drop off, or just before I stop sharing so that we can have more chat, that's really eBird. There is a lot more to learn. You could take the eBird Essentials course available on the website. I just wanted to say a couple things about our objectives at the Marble Valley Farm and Claire Murphy Trail. We are going to continue doing habitat restoration, not just around the lagoon, but on the buffer and the edge of the preserve with the Housatonic River. And we're having an Earth Day stewardship event, work day, this Saturday, which I know that some of you have signed up for. So I want to thank you for that. But we are going to continue with restoration. Hope that we can continue to build the native plant bank at the preserve, and that will attract and create better habitat from the birds that are using the Housatonic River corridor. And we want to use the eBird hotspot and this thing called a chronologue, which is demonstrated on the right-hand side of this slide. It's basically a bracket that helps you to position your phone in the same place and take photos over the course of time from the same exact position. So something that will help us track our restoration effort over time and see how the landscape changes. So we hope that you will get involved. If you can't come on Saturday, there will be work days throughout the year that we'll invite the public to. And also we hope that you'll help us to evaluate whether or not what we're doing is working by coming to the farm and eBirding there. So that's what I really hope that you'll try and be inspired to do, having heard us tonight. The last thing is to encourage even more use of eBird. We're also launching this thing that we're calling the bird packs. Coming soon, beginning May 13th of 2023, which coincides with Global Bid Day. It's the Global Migratory Bird Day. We are going to make these bird packs available for loan at the Kent Memorial Library. They have binoculars. They have a field guide, they have trail maps, they have information on all of KLT's hotspots, eBird hotspots. They have the how-tos, the basic how-tos of how to do eBird and Merlin. And there will also be some challenges and contests to kind of inspire that healthy competition. So look for the bird packs, go check one out if you don't have this equipment for yourself. And that's about it. So I'm going to come off share and I'm going to stop our recording and we can hang out and continue to do questions if you have any.
Right.